Hi everyone, my name's Kaylee and today I want to share with you my diabetes story. The reason I wanted to make this video today is I'm a little over a year from being diagnosed with the official condition latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. And I'm so different now today than I was even just a year ago with the diagnosis. And as I get into my story, even different a year ago than I was previous to that when I had a different type of diabetes. So I guess I wanted to timestamp where I'm at in my journey and be able to reflect on this for years to come. And then I also wanted to share my story with other people in hopes that if you're going through something similar, whether it's diabetes or some sort of chronic health issue or an autoimmune issue, I hope that some of my story can just serve as like a bookmark for you or something that you can like refer back to, encouragement or solace or something that you can relate to, because it really is something that unless you've gone through an autoimmune condition or unless you've gone through like diabetes specifically, it's really difficult to understand the mindset and the mentality and the choices you're faced with, both at large but on a day-to-day basis. And so I really wanted this video again to serve as something I can look back on years from now and see like where I was in my diagnosis and in my story and in my journey, but also as a touchstone for people who might be going through something similar. So I'll get into sort of the timeline of it and just sort of lay out how I was diagnosed and what happened. So I got pregnant in 2022. No, I got married in 2022. I got pregnant in 2023, the end of 2023, with my son. And as those of you who have been pregnant know, you do a routine glucose test as part of your pregnancy. I think it was like 26 or 28 weeks for me, something like that. And I went in with like full confidence, feeling good, feeling like it was going to be fine. And I did have some contacts from some of my other friends that had been pregnant before that most people, maybe not most, but a lot of people do fail the first glucose test by like a couple of points, and they may have to do like a longer glucose test. And I can go into the details of that in a separate video, but essentially the first one you do is a 1-hour glucose test. You drink a certain amount of sugar in this like glucose drink, and they test your blood afterwards to see what your blood sugar is, to see if your body is properly digesting sugar and if your insulin is working correctly, etc. It is known that in pregnancy you become more insulin resistant, and so that's the reason one of this these screenings exists. Anyway, to get back on track here, so I went in for the first glucose test feeling really good, and I ended up taking the test, went home, and I failed with like flying colors. Like they did not ask me back to sit for another test just to see if it was a fluke. It was very much like, you have gestational diabetes, you failed. For those of you wondering what my sugar was, it was like 212 an hour after I had had the drink. So very high when you're talking about what the normal range should be, which is like 120 or below. So it was almost a full 100 points higher than what is expected at that time. So that was jarring and shocking, and I had a lot of emotions when I was first diagnosed in those first few weeks. And honestly, that probably deserves its own video for me to sort of go through that in detail. But really, that's the first time that this was sort of flagged for me, is you have gestational diabetes. This is, something that you're going to live with until the end of your pregnancy. And so at that point, I was diet and lifestyle controlled for about 2 weeks. So again, I'll spare you the details of what that looked like, and I can go into that in a separate video. But really, I was really trying very hard. I was super strict with my diet, very conscious of every carb that was in every single thing, and went back to the doctor with all of my logs from the past 2 weeks, and they said, you know what, you're just not going to be able to keep your sugars under control with diet and lifestyle, and so we need to start you on insulin. And so then came the second wave of emotions and feeling like I had failed myself and feeling like my body had failed me. And, you know, you're already going through, or I was already going through all these emotions being pregnant and feeling like there was so much riding on my body. And so it was really, really upsetting that my body wasn't working the way it was supposed to for me, but also for my son, right? So fast forward, I get through the end of my pregnancy. I'm taking insulin. I ended up doing like a basal insulin overnight and then a fast acting during the day for my meal time. So full blown like insulin therapy, right? I had my son, and with gestational diabetes, they told me like completely come off of everything, no insulin after the baby is born, and we'll do a 6-week checkup afterwards to make sure that everything's going okay. So I go back for my 6-week checkup and they do another glucose test. And I passed. So I was feeling really, really good. I was like, okay, like this is great news. Passed the sugar test. I'm fine. It was just gestational diabetes and I don't have to worry about this anymore. Like, thank God, this was horrible. But even at that point in time, I will say my mindset had already shifted a lot on like what it looked like to eat better, what it looked like to pay attention more to what was in my food. Because if you have gestational diabetes, you are more at risk for developing type 2 diabetes. So I was already sort of like freaked out about that and like on the lookout. I also have an autoimmune thyroid disease. So I had already had a relationship with an endocrinologist. So I was going back to the endocrinologist post-pregnancy, postpartum, to get my thyroid medicine adjusted and things like that. And I mentioned to her, I said, I just don't feel good. Like something's wrong. I'm tired. Like, and of course, you know, thank goodness for this doctor because she didn't just chalk it up to like, you have a newborn, so of course you're tired, right? She said, you know what, let's run some panels. Let's just see what's going on. And so she ran, you know, full sweep panels and my A1C came back elevated. And she was like, this just isn't normal for you. It's not normal for, you know, your weight and like your activity levels and things like that. So let's run some antibody tests and see if anything comes back. So that is when she ran antibodies for, insulin, zinc, and GAD. And my insulin came back negative, zinc came back negative, but the GAD antibody came back positive. So at that point, I had another appointment with her and she sort of broke down the blood work for me and essentially said, listen, type 1 diabetes in adults means you have 2 or more antibodies that are positive. You have 1 antibody that is positive. So this is an autoimmune disease. It's called latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. And it is similar to a type 1. Some people call it type 1.5. Because there is a component of my condition where I'm insulin resistant, like a type 2, but I also have antibodies attacking my pancreas and the ability to produce the sufficient amount of insulin I need, like a type 1. So after that diagnosis, I was just devastated. Absolutely no timeline to remission. This wasn't the same as gestational where they were like, hey, wait and see. Like once you get done with being pregnant, everything's fine and like you're going to be fine. This is for life. This is the rest of my life. And I think that's been really, really difficult to sit with. I wasn't prepared for the amount of like day in and day out decisions that would ride on my health and wellness. I wasn't prepared for the level of like bombarding that you get in public. So some things I'm thinking about are like all the GLP-1s that you see out and about that people are using to lose weight. Every single medication that you take over the counter, cold medicine, cough medicine, anything, it says, you know, consult your doctor if you have diabetes, right? So diabetes really is this all-encompassing disease that like it affects every part of your life, every part of your body, especially your endocrine system, right? That's, you know, my thyroid, you know, your kidneys, like there's so many things that are riding on your diabetes being like well controlled and well managed. And so I guess that brings me to where I'm at with it today. And I go back and forth, and every day is a little bit different. Right now, I am diet and lifestyle controlled. So my body is still producing insulin, and I keep myself to a pretty strict diet as far as like carbs per meal, carbs and snacks, things like that. But it is really difficult on one hand, and on the other hand, I feel better when I'm managing it well. So I do have more energy, I'm happier, I'm like in a better place when I know that my sugar is well maintained, because it does factor into my mental state and my emotions and my productivity. But it is incredibly difficult when, you know, everybody wants to go out to, you know, just get something quick, go through a drive-through, run through McDonald's, and I'm like scouring the menu and looking up on the side how many carbs are in the McDonald's fried chicken salad, and those kinds of things. Like it is an all-encompassing part of my life now. And, you know, just in reflecting on this for the past year, I have so much more empathy for people with chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases. And I had the Hashimoto's autoimmune disease before. But it's so much easier to maintain because it's just sort of a pill, and I didn't have to do anything else. And maybe in retrospect, I should have done more to take care of myself with that diagnosis as well. But just on its face, the difference in managing diabetes and managing my thyroid disease has been very, very different. And again, like I said, I just have so much more empathy for people who have been dealing with diabetes their whole life, those who deal with it in adulthood. There's so many things, and honestly, I'll probably make more videos on this because it's a lot to process in one sitting. But I guess I just want to put this out there to let anyone know who's going through something similar, chronic illness, diabetes, whatever, that you're not alone, and there are a lot of people that are going through something similar, and it's okay that it sucks some days and that it's hard, you know, and you have to do what you have to do to take care of yourself and make sure that you're going to be there for the people that you love and the moments that you want to be present for. And I'm even giving that advice to myself because, you know, today's my birthday, actually, and I was just thinking about like, oh, like what do I want to do to celebrate, and you know, am I going to have a special treat and things like that. And, you know, to each his own. I'm not here to tell anyone what they should or shouldn't be eating or how they should or shouldn't manage their diabetes. But I think it's become, you know, something that I have to think about that I just never did before. It would be like, oh, I'll get whatever desserts on the menu at dinner or whatever. And now I just have to think a little bit more. And maybe that's a lesson for all of us, just to think a little bit more before we act, before we respond, before we eat, before we, you know, just keep our lives on autopilot. Because if there's one good thing that's come out of this diagnosis for me, I am so much more thoughtful about myself and what I eat, what I do, and I'm so much more thoughtful about the people around me. Sometimes I see people with like a CGM on, like I wear, a continuous glucose monitor, and I just like, I see them more as like whole human beings. I'm going to get emotional because I see this person standing there, and I know what a glimpse of their life must look like from having experienced it myself. And I just have so much more awareness that we're all just like doing the best we can, you know? So anyway, I've rambled enough at this point, but I really just wanted to put this out here for me, to catalog where I'm at. And hopefully this is helpful to anyone watching that may be going through something similar. So thank you all for watching, or not, but I really appreciate it.